G'day guys, it's Calvin from the Cartoon Company down under in New Zealand. I'm doing another Link, yet another one. This one, like all the others, is a little bit different from all the others. I don't tend to do so much of just the same thing, but lots of the job is the same as other jobs, and the process is all the same. So this one's for a mate of mine. Many years ago, I wired up his VVTi 1UZ and disabled the immobilizer before it was a common conversion to do. He drove that ute for quite a while, and he's since passed that ute on to his son. And I see him a bit like one of my peers. We both have owned workshops at the same time, repairing cars, fixing stuff. And if we've needed someone to bounce ideas off, we kind of call on each other. Yes, even I do need to bounce ideas off people at times. And even though it's been a long time since we've actually seen each other face to face, I still consider him a pretty good mate. And he's been on me for a while about putting a link into his race car. He happens to have an old NZ HQ race car, which he slapped a 1UZ into. It's running a standard ECU. And each year he does an event called the 24-hour Lemons. It's a fun event, Hampton Downs racetrack, run for 24 hours. And I've been meaning to get up to see him. It sort of coincided with sprint boats. But this year, it doesn't. Shit, I hope it doesn't. Let me just check. Did you see some serious worry in my eyes? 9th or 10th of May. Let's just confirm. Man's on the messenger right now. 8th, 9th, 10th of May. We're good. So I've got plenty of time, but we want to have the car ready well beforehand. And as part of this whole deal, which I can't actually remember the whole deal anyway, I'm making a loom, there's an ECU, there's a CAN Lambda, it's going in the car, and I'm getting a drive as well. He's actually going to let me into the race car as part of this event. I'm not sure this is his wisest move, so I have questioned his mental capacity right at this point in time. But hey, I'm all about making memories. Life's about making memories, so hell yes, I'm going. So as such, I'd better make a loom. Or a harness, it's the same thing. I've already hooked in and made the start side of things. I've discussed the configurations of it, and I've decided to pretty much do what I want, and Zane doesn't have a choice, and he's going to like it. Yep. It's pretty simple, eh? So I've got a bit of an idea in my head, as a lot of things. Planning, yep, that's in my head. I will write down some things on a piece of paper, but most of it's in my head. What I will do as part of this is show the setup of the factory stepper motor. So set up the setup with the factory IAC valve with the Link ECU is a little bit different, and people often get it wrong. The rest of it's pretty much just making a wiring loom. Tefsel wire, coils, igniter, an air temp sensor, TPS, position sensors. Put it together, make it go. Simple. He has already fitted up some of my extractors, which is pretty cool. And I'm also going to think about the other intake manifold that I've got sitting here, because Zane is getting a dyno. It's probably about a 5-6 hour drive from here, but that's all right. Some free time on a dyno testing can probably be arranged. Hint, 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 hint. So enough talking. Old Yeller is yet again going to be the test mule for this job. The knock sensor and start loom is completed to a Deutsch plug. let's get into this. Let's make a loom, and hopefully at the end of it we can go racing and we can get some footage from that as well. Who needs sleep? When I get kind of excited about a job, really into it, I kind of just hammer into it. I just keep going and going and going. And this one seems like it's one I'm enjoying. I've already wired this car several times in my head. I've always been like that. So the plans are in my head, the wiring, where things are going. It's all up in my head. Makes it really tricky when I'm trying to either make a video or record what I do, because there's stuff I don't always realize that I'm doing. But it's coming along really well. Let's have a look. So I'm going down the right hand side here. You can see I've got injectors in, covering it in Motorsport Raychem, and we're just working on the front branch here. We'll be looking at that idle speed and how that works. Just another note here is this is like the basis of like one of my universal looms. We're a bit out of focus today. So this could be adapted to any ECU, because when we get to the other end, it's just going to be some wires. One of my plans this year is to have more looms like this. This is what you get. This is what's included, ready to go out. I've got a lot of other work to do and conversions, so it's down the list a little bit. And I'm also quite confident I can make up, well, I know I can, make up a conversion loom for a standard ECU. All brand new, and a little bit of this is what you get, and you plug in your igniters and your airflow meter and your ECU. Probably going to start with Gen 2, UCF20. Plug it in, start it, good to go. Relays and fuses are done. Really simple. The same concept I use for the aftermarket computers. And I've already got all the parts to do the jobs. I'll be finished in braid, so look neat and tidy. So that's kind of where I'm heading. Possibly through the middle of the engine, so I can do the left and right hand thing really easily with one loop. Right, back into this. It's quite early here, so it's quite cool. I worked late last night when it was cool. I work till it gets hot and then take a break from the workshop because it gets scalding in here. That back wall, I measured it yesterday at 47 degrees, which resulted in about a 35 to 37 degree heat in here. So it's warm, not rubbing it into all the guys that are in the snow at the moment. It gets cold here in the winter too. It doesn't snow though. Back into work. I'll show you once I get to doing that ECU plug. We have the right hand side all done. We have the left hand side all done. When it gets fitted, it's going to go in behind here and tuck through to the crank sensor. It's going to be secured there. And the cam sensor is going to be secured. This is going to go up to the coil. It's like that, yep. And it's going to be zip tied, cable tied in there like that. That's lovely. Air temp sensor I made long enough so it can either go in the throttle body or in the intake. Using a Bosch style, Bosch 200 igniter and a Link 1.15 bar map sensor. I considered using this style of map sensor, screw in, but we're going to do the Link product this time. Stick with the Link ones. Also fitted up a noise suppressor. Whilst this is a race car and I'm not really worried about noise coming through to the radio, suppressors are a bit like condoms. You're better to have them and not need them than need one and not have it. So if you're ever unsure, just slap one in there. funnily enough, I have very few problems with noise. It does happen, but keeping those suppressors in there does help. Well, can help. I don't know, because if I don't run them, I haven't had noise problems. The G4 Link, the whole range has actually been pretty good, I've found, for not having interference. But I have seen a couple, especially like the plugins, standard looms, a couple of little funny things happening, but most of the time I've been pretty lucky. I've now fed my ray chem all the way up to the engine. That is a single piece, which was a little bit of a mission. I've marked it here where it needs to go to the ECU, and it looks like Zane's going to get a couple of extra inches, which most guys don't normally complain about, a couple of extra inches. That one really isn't the same when you do it in metric. Every guy would like an extra 50 millimeters. It doesn't have the ring to it like inches. So that's certainly the favourable measurement for some things, isn't it? Using the inches over the millimeters, centimeters. Next, I am going to slap a couple of ECU plugs on it. I've had a bit of a discussion with Link, and it looks like we're going to get some stickers for the car. That's pretty cool. And I'm still thinking it's pretty trusting of Zane to let me in his car. I did ask about the height thing, being able to reach the pedals. It's got adjustable runners, so we're okay there. Earth's on the back, all ready to go. Now we just need some ECU plugs, and some body plugs and some relays and fuses, I've gone through, I've fired up the laptop. I've got the laptop there and written up my sheets, scribbled some ideas and some pinouts. Now to attach those two to these wires. So I'll get into that. I will do some specifics on the idle speed control. We'll get into that. So, time to get moving. I was going to include the ECU hold function with this one, but I think I'm probably going to just flick that out and do something separate, because it's going to be a little bit boring. But the basic idea of it is the ECU will stay on after the key is turned off and the engine dies, and that will allow the stepper to reset. So as a basic overview, when you power it up like so, voltage comes up to this diode, which comes to, also powers up the relay, powers up the ECU and the stepper and bits and pieces. Here's the ECU. And that same ignition signal goes to the ECU as well. At that point, the ECU has an output, hold power, that turns the relay on, so it takes the loading off that ignition input. When you turn the key off, the ECU sees the key has been turned off. The engine, the injectors, and the spark are turned off, but that main ECU relay is held on for however long you program it, at which point the auxiliary output drops off, the relay de-energizes, and the whole circuit turns off. They're a little bit prone to backfeeds when not done correctly. So you use the EFI relay or the ECU relay as the power supply, the ignition power supply on the switched side to the other relays. And that generally stops any backfeeds. There are two different ways of wiring it in the Link software. So it's important that they're wired correctly, whether you're using an auxiliary output or an ignition injector output. I'm actually going to go over and do a much more detailed video. I'll show the setup. So if you are doing ECU hold, and it doesn't just apply to Lexus engines, it can also be for the likes of your Evo engines, a range of Toyota engines, of course, that run that same stepper. So I'm going to do that, power this thing up, and we'll come back. I probably should take the gaskets out of the intake manifold, my blanker gaskets, and make it so the engine's actually ready to run. We'll make it go. I've now unlocked my ECU, taken out the plenum blanker gaskets because it kind of looked like a dick if I left them in and tried to start it. And I've just got to go over and check this tune profile. Whenever you put one in, you should always calibrate your TPS and give it a basic check. When I power it up, the fuel pump primes, so I've got that bit right. One thing I do know I've changed is the map sensor. This has got a different map sensor. I'm just going to change that. I didn't want it to beep at me. Map sensor type. Oh, it's beeping at me again. Just got to change it to the Link 1.15 bar. And then I will calibrate that. A few things to check. How close are the temperatures? And they're both really close. I've only got the two. There's a third one available if we wanted to put it in. I was thinking cabin temp actually, but I was told to keep it simple. In this ECU, I've loaded two tuning maps, so I've put it, could be changed on an external switch on the dash, so if it rained, you could kill some power. Alternatively, it could just be on a virtual, so inside the computer, you have to plug the laptop in and physically change it. But it does allow a bit of a head start when you're setting things up. Cleared my fault codes. Let's see if it goes. Yeah. This engine's been run up and tested, and you'll notice it wasn't running perfectly like it should yet, and that's fine. We're just setting up, going through and configuring everything. I had a talk with the good buggers down at Link ECU, and they sent us a little care package, CAN Lambda, which is something that I recommend on all of my installs if I can. They're a great unit, or some sort of wideband. And a Storm. So that was pretty good of them. There was also a map sensor and some plugs, which I just put them back into my stock. But it looks like we're going to have to put a sticker onto the car. So I'm really pleased that the guys at Link were willing just to help us out and give us an additional discount on these parts. It was really good of them. And I like to support local product. So let's get this thing running properly so I can take the loom off, send it up, and Zane can fit it to his race car and continue so we have the car ready to race when we're meant to be racing. Zane and I have had a discussion about this plug, OBD2 plug. I had put a CAN plug in, that one, and that's the plug into the CAN Lambda. So I could have just built an adapter off that, but I decided to put a separate plug in it. And I know I did say he'll get what he's given. We may have actually discussed this earlier, and I may have forgotten. Isn't it a great feeling when you plug it in for the first time? Whew, good to go. Some setup. you notice how much nicer that's running? I haven't changed anything in the ECU. I got a bad bunch of fuel the other day, and I don't actually run a fuel filter on my test engine. So I'm breaking my own rules. You really should run a fuel filter. So we've just popped the injectors out, gave them a clean, popped them back in. Ta-da! It's all good again. Now I'm going to do some setup of it, sort the idle speed. It's got a little bit of a startup, a stall, anti-stall that's holding it up a little bit. And Zane will go through and set up the final parts of this once he receives his loom. Anti-stall. And I've got to set up the can lander. So a wideband unit gives you the ability to have the mixture control, or having mixture control across the whole range. So you can read it properly. And that's a big advantage when you're trying to tune the engine and monitor what's going on. I really like them. When wired correctly, they plug in nicely, really, really easy to use, and they just seem to work really well. Hence, I really, really like to use them. Now I'm pretty sure Zane will be able to assemble all this, but I'm going to do a really, really fast recap at my pace for Zane to follow to fit this loom up. Zane, this is how you fit it. Put the loom on the engine, plug all the plugs in, crank angle goes behind, fit the oil pressure sensor, plug it in, coil, throttle body, air temp mounted, or you can mount it out here if you want. This is for your water temp. Blue goes over there, brown is the earth, goes over there. Actually mount the igniter on a piece of aluminium on the firewall. Mount the map sensor, probably not on a screw on the engine. Mount the suppressor. Earths. There, or there, wherever. Start loom. Put it into the starter motor. Fuse box. You have to earth this wire, otherwise the start relay won't work. This big one here, battery power, preferably through a fuse. Wideband. Possibly not 50 millimeters, 2 inches from an open pipe. I don't think it reads too well. It's been reading a bit lean. Plug in the wideband. Mount your OBD2. I'll throw in one of those for your smartphone. Plug in the ECU. This plug. Wiring diagrams right there for it. Ignition input there. Start input there. Fuel pump output there. Fan there and there. Simple. Diode. There's a spare diode. There's the plug for that one. Plug this one in. And it's good. Start it up, make it go. The simplest fitting instructions I could do. Oh, except if I just put it in a box and said, here you go. Do whatever you want with it. Oh, firewall grommet. Look at that. There you go. Push that through the firewall. With that, it pretty much goes. Notice my start key. Brum, brum. racing.